Greetings, everybody. Good to see you. Yeah, so I decided I want to do a live stream on this topic because I get it a lot, and I wanted to cover a number of different topics and be able to answer a few questions as we go and everything. So, James, thanks. Appreciate it. It was born out of laziness and now seems to be sticking around. But yeah, we're going to talk about using a digital interface for all things bass. I mean, you know, it's titled recording, and we're definitely going to touch on that a lot, but there's a lot that you can get by using a recording software and interface and everything that goes beyond just recording songs and things. So I'm going to get into that first, and then what I'll probably do is go a chunk at a time on the different topics I've set up, and then I'll look over questions and that type of thing. So let's get started. One of the big reasons why I encourage so much getting into using your computer for your work on bass is that, again, it's not just about songs or writing an album or pro recording or something. It can have a lot of other uses that can really benefit your playing. Like a number of the things I use it for are, one, for when I'm trying to figure out songs. It's a real benefit because most digital software for recording, you can slow audio down. And I can slow it down, be able to hear it better, be able to transcribe better. And on that topic, this is also going to serve a video that's coming up later in the week where I'm going to rant about tabs again, because apparently I need to. But having this type of software, you can slow down recordings, take your time, and be able to figure out the music. The other thing, as far as that kind of goes, is it can help you rehearse things. If you're struggling with a song that's fast and you can't play it up to, if you can't play it up to speed, then you can slow a song down and rehearse it slowly, a piece at a time, really get to learn it, and then be able to speed it up as you go. So two really, really beneficial things. One on how to learn it, one on how to practice it. I have a template specifically for my practice that I use as a song file inside of the DAW that I use. DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation. If you're not familiar, it's the software. And I can keep a record also of my practice. I can record a practice session, and every bit as important as practicing is listening to what happened. I record my practice sessions, and then I go back and listen to them. And a lot of times I'll hear things that I wouldn't normally hear because I'm so focused on the instrument. And that makes a big difference. I catch things in my playing that I don't always get. Another thing that can really help is by recording your sessions, you get to see over time what developments you've made. And it's also a good motivational tool. I can go back if I feel like I'm frustrated or I'm kind of locked up. I can go back to a song file, say, 6 months ago, and look at where I started. And all of a sudden, I realize, I've made a lot more progress than maybe I thought. So, that can be beneficial too, keeping a record of your progress and finding out your strengths and your weaknesses. So I'm actually going to scoot over here just a bit. So those are some great things that being able to record yourself can do, and also being able to manipulate songs and slow and speed up tempos. Now, a final one can be if you're learning about EQ. A lot of times it's hard to sit and learn about EQ while you're actually playing your bass. So a huge advantage can be playing your instrument, recording it, and listening to it over drums or guitars or that type of thing, and then using the EQ inside a scientific manner. And we're having a bit of a connection problem here. Sorry about that if it dropped out. Hopefully we're back up. So you can, just to backtrack a little bit in case that skipped on you, you could go in and experiment with EQ by recording yourself against a song or something and listen to what the different EQ tweaks do in real time. And then you can start to understand what maybe preamps or amps you should be buying, things like that, because you're making a more informed choice. Being able to go, this is how I want to sound in a mix. And because I can't adjust this frequency or that frequency, this is why my amp isn't working for me. So you learn a lot about sound design, and that can be really beneficial too, making a much more informed gear choice and understanding your sound. It can help you be able to get your sound in almost any situation because you've done this experimentation. You can walk in and go, oh, okay, I got to get an outboard EQ, and I know I need my 120 hertz hit. I want my 2.5K grind on top. I need this. You start to understand your sound, and you can start to be able to get it out of more and more pieces of gear rather than relying on just one thing. So those are some great things that even just outside of recording music and working on songs, that working in digital recording can be a big boon to. So this is why I so strongly recommend it. So let's check it out real quick. Yeah, Stephen, exactly what I covered there about slowing songs down. Marcus, still can't figure out DAWs. Well, we're going to cover a lot, so hopefully this will get it to you. You can also pitch shift a song if your bass is in a different tuning. Excellent. Great point, Stephen. That's, again, another advantage. It allows a lot of malleability that you don't have when you're just sitting down trying to work by yourself with a straight sound. You can affect so many different parameters and practice and learn much more efficiently. Let's see, EQ in real time. Yeah, so the first thing I want to get into, and we're going to go a step at a time here, is gear choices, what you do need to get started and what you don't need to get started. Because I see a lot of people who, I think we tend to do this a lot with a lot of different things, but we put our the highest quality as our expectation bar when we're first getting started. And until we can achieve that, we don't mess with anything else. And one, quality is better than it's ever been. And you don't have to spend a ton of money. And two, I've always learned, I used to do computer work and things like that. And one of the painful lessons I learned was never be on the bleeding edge of technology if you're not an expert. Because by the time you become good enough to really work with the thing that you spent a lot of money on, it's now outdated and it's time to upgrade again. So let's talk again about a basic system and what upgrades you should look at first as you go. So the first thing you're going to need is obviously some kind of computer. But if you're doing basic recording, just your bass and a couple of, basic plugins or some basic software, you don't need that much anymore. Most computers are, more than processor heavy enough to handle it. Now, if you guys are regular on the channel, you've seen my system behind me. It's not bleeding edge, broadcasting to you on now right here. Looks like we're having a bit of a connection thing here again, unfortunately. Good, back up. So, again, my system back here, but I'm on a Windows tablet, and I've even used like one of the small Samsungs for really basic recordings. Here on the Surface, I've recorded a lot of the sketches for a number of my songs, done the bass, guitar, drums, everything on them. It's more than powerful enough. So don't go bananas thinking you have to have, this massively powerful computer. It's just not necessary. So the first thing you're really going to need outside of your computer is going to be an interface. And again, a lot of people get caught up in this. So I'm going to give you a couple of different scenarios to kind of guide you as to what you need up front. A very simple interface is going to serve you if all you're ever going to do is plug your bass in and do some recordings. You can look at things like the Focusrite preamps. They have like a 2-channel, I think, that plugs in via USB, works perfectly fine. I even use, for this mobile tablet, I use a Behringer, which you wouldn't think might not be all that great. A UMC, they have a 204 and a 404. I use a 404. I bought one used for $100, and it's got multiple ins and outs. It's got preamps on it. I've been able to do even reamping, which is something we'll get into in a minute. Having to, send stuff out that I've already recorded to process outside the computer and bring it back in, work perfectly fine. Most interfaces And I will pounce all over anybody that tries to tell you different. Unless you're really good at hearing differences and you've maybe got an audio engineer background or you've done some mixing or things, you're not going to hear the difference. You can plug straight into most audio interfaces, and for all intents and purposes for yourself, you would not hear the difference in between the $150 one and the $3,000 one. It's refinements that only make sense at a really pro level. And the technology's just gotten good enough that there's no reason to start there. So if you're just getting started, you want a minimum of 2 channels, and you want to be able to just have something that's fairly reliable and make sure that it easily connects to what you have. Like I wouldn't buy Firewire or something like that that's going outdated. Just a USB in, make sure that the drivers are solid and reliable if you're using a PC, and you're good. But don't spend a lot of money. Get something that you see a lot of other people using. You don't have to spend a ton of money. I probably, if you're just getting started, wouldn't break the $200 mark. So beyond that, people talk about, do you need a DI or a direct in or something like that? Again, just getting started, you don't need it. It's going to be just fine for you. And, I didn't record with DIs for a long time. I still on occasion don't. And if you're not familiar, a DI is kind of a buffered interface, like something like this, or a Countryman, that kind of buffers your signal and enhances it going into the computer. Especially in a mix, most people aren't going to hear it. And if you're just getting started, you're not going to know the difference either. Just get your interface. So then you basically have 2 more pieces that you need to solve. You need to look at your software, and you need to look at how you hear it. Now, the main thing being, we'll get to software in a minute, but the other piece of hardware is how you hear it. If you're working with something mobile, that basically means you're going to go to headphones. Get yourself it's worth getting a decent set of headphones so that you can hear things clearly, especially if you're going to be learning about EQ. Get something biodynamic or some Sony or something, not consumer ones. Look for something that tends to be rated flat or is more for kind of a studio environment. You can find them used all over eBay and things like that. But get something that's going to be pretty decent, is going to hold up, and is going to give you an accurate representation, not something that has a lot of color in the sound. Like I said, if you just do a search on best headphones for audio use or best headphones for recording or something, and same thing for cheap headphones for recording, tons of recommendations, that's going to be your investment. If you're on a tablet or something, that's pretty much going to be the way you need to go. Now, if you're on a larger system or you want something out, get yourself a set of monitors. Again, don't go nuts because your ears aren't educated enough yet to really get with it. I'd recommend going with, one, make sure you get powered monitors. It's going to be simpler on you. You're going to be able to move them around. And what powered monitors mean is that instead of having a power amp that has to send, you have to send your interface's signal out to the power and then to the speakers. They already have amps inside of them. Easy to transport, simplifies your setup. So you can get stuff from M Audio, from JBL. I personally like a company called Kali. They've done really well. I started out with a set of their smaller monitors when I switched from JBLs, which were perfectly good. But then I upgraded to one of their larger series, and I really like those. They're really good on the budget too. So, but again, don't go nuts with that stuff until you can really hear a difference. So, a small set of monitors, maybe I'd say if you're getting started, probably your optimal is going to be like a 6 or 8 inch style speaker cone. Easily transportable and are probably not going to be too expensive. So that's going to, for the most part, take care of your hardware. You need to look at your software now. I know the recommendation is going to be popping up in here. I can already see it, David. The easiest to get your feet wet, because there's a free trial, extended and everything, is go with Reaper. It's cross-platform. It works really well. I've seen really pro stuff be done in it. Don't let anybody say, oh, it's not pro software. It's just fine. And that's going to get you started. And then you'll also learn what you do and don't want in recording software. And then if you decide to go with other brand or something, you know which to choose because you know what things you felt were deficient in Reaper, what things you enjoyed, and you can step up. My personal choice is I use Studio One from PreSonus. I really like it because I feel like it was made from a musician's point of view rather than, I feel like a lot of DAWs are made from kind of an audio nerd perspective, and I want it from a musician's perspective. I want it to look like a mixing console. I want it to be familiar to the way I think, not how someone who really likes programming and a lot of decoration thinks. So I enjoy Studio One, but that's my preference. Again, start with Reaper, get in there. You may stick with it and be perfectly happy with it, or you may move on. But just getting those monitors or headphones, your basic system that you're going to tie stuff into, and a decent interface is going to get you up and running. And if you're smart about it, you know, you can pop max $500 into it and be up and running. Now, the last piece of software that I feel like we should talk about, that I think is especially essential for bass, is going to be some kind of drum software, meaning something that you can write drum parts on, or you can play MIDI grooves or things like that, so that you have something to play and write against and start developing, you know, a better understanding and relationship with drums. It even makes practicing more fun because, you know, instead of having this metronome going all the time, being able to put on a cool drum loop to do your practice over is a lot more fun, and you'll develop your sense of feel and time that isn't computer generated a lot better. So that could be really cool, and there's a number of them out there. I've used TuneTrack's drums, Steven Slate drums, Get Good drums, BFD drums. There's tons of them out there. I've used Blasting Room, which I like a lot. And you can get a number of these things for not a lot of money. If you go to TuneTrack, I would say something like Easy Drummer or something like that, since you're not looking so much for a ton of options and mixes, and get something like that. And then you can get, you know, tons of packs of MIDI grooves from different players that you can use inside of it, and use that to get started in either writing, practicing, developing your tone against drums. It's really useful. So I definitely recommend you get something like that. Last up is going to be a warning about software, is because we all tend to like to gear nerd out and stuff. Now that we're on a different platform, we want to nerd out with that too. And we'll tend to go nuts with plugins. And plugins are different effects or processors that you can get to work inside your software with. It's a rabbit hole you can go down. I've done it many times. But trust me when I tell you that usually the stock set of plugins that you have are going to cover most of your stuff. They really are. Don't be tempted to go out for all these, you know, really crazy things. They're going to seem really fun and interesting, or like you absolutely have to have them. 6 months down the road, you're going to go, wow, I hardly ever use that thing anymore. Don't be attracted by the shiny things. Remember that what your core work is and what you want to get done. And if it doesn't fit into that, let it go until you're better at working with the stuff. But it should cover you pretty well. So before I move on to some other considerations, I'm going to check here real quick. Let's see. Focusrite. Yeah. Stephen with the second gen Focusrite. Yeah, they work perfectly fine. The one I'm actually using is their rack mounted version, the full blown 8 in, 8 out. Tried the Focusrite, hated the software. Okay, fair enough. Doesn't bother me that much, but you know, maybe try the Behringer, try M Audio. There's a ton of different smaller ones out there. Now let's talk about getting your bass into the computer and the sound. You're basically looking at 3 options. You can either go into your amp or into your processors or pedals, your already finished sound, and that into the computer. You can record clean and use software to create your sound, or you can do what's called reamping. So let's talk about each one of them and some options on it. Now, you're kind of already there if, say, you have like the Tech 21 Doug pedal or an RBI or something like that. You're plugging your bass into it and you're recording it with the sound already done. All you have to do is make sure your output levels aren't overloading the interface and, even that stuff out. That's pretty much the job done. So, you can always go that way. It's the simplest. It offers you less maneuverability later, but you can do that. Now, the second one is using amp sims, where you would record clean into the computer and then you add the amps as plugins in later. Tons of those available and cheap. You can get some. There's a company called Audio Assault that makes a couple of those. There's some free ones available from a number of different companies. I've been kind of partial to some of the JST amp sims. I use the Bassforge Hellraiser a lot. They have an Ampeg style rig with the kind of Rex Brown sound. That one's been cool. But basically, if you just go metal bass sound, or, if you're not doing metal, just whatever bass amp sim, you're going to get a ton of options out there. And really, I would say on the high end, spend $80. On the bottom end, you can find ones that are like $10. So that's a great option going in. I do that a lot, even though I have hardware, just for simplicity. I can just record in clean, use an amp sim on the inside, and that works fine for me. Let's check this out real quick. Audio Assault stuff. Ugertone, Cult Drums. Yeah, that's another good piece of drum software. Very cheap. Shout out to them. I have no association, but I've gotten stuff from them. Ugertone makes some great low expense type of drum stuff. Very cool. Bought the AMT reamp to EQ tracks, and I've been sent. Really good for getting things back together. Yeah, I'm going to show that in a minute. But the final way to deal with your sound, and the third one, and what'll cost a little bit more in hardware, is called reamping. And what reamping means is that you record your bass clean, but then you send out to a piece of hardware, kind of in an effects loop. Then you use the hardware to create your sound. Then that's sent back into the computer. And so you don't have to kind of print or finalize your sound until you want to at the end. So the whole process would go like, say I have a bass line that I'm writing for a song, and I'm not sure exactly how I want it to sound in the mix. So I would record my bass clean and then listen to it through the hardware. I would do that, work with the hardware until I got my sound just how I wanted it. Then I would record onto another track that sound of my clean bass going through the hardware to affect it to a final version. I do that a lot. That's basically how I record anything pro that I'm doing or something really serious. I'll usually get a basic tone while I'm just working with something with amp sims, and then I reamp out to either my pedal board or my rack mount RBI Tech 21 or something like that. The only thing that you need for that, though, is you need to make sure that your interface has one option, and you're going to need one other piece of hardware. For the interface, you need to make sure you have more than two outputs, because if you're using monitors and you only have two outputs, to send out to a hardware unit, you're pretty much done. Your monitors are plugged into inputs or outputs 1 and 2, so you have no other way to send it out and be able to hear yourself. So you need something with, I would go with usually a 4 output thing, like the one I use for mobile, the Behringer UMC 404, has 4 outputs, and I've been able to reamp with it. Now, the other thing that you need is a reamp box. And basically what a reamp box does is it converts the line level signal coming out of your interface into one that is what your pedals and your rack gear is used to seeing, which is a guitar level output. Now, do a little extra study on this if you're not familiar, but line level and instrument level are 2 different things. They're different levels of signal volume, to simplify it. But a line level is not going to sound going into your hardware the way guitar level input is going to be, like going straight from your instrument. So you need something that's going to match that level for you. And that's called a reamp box. There's a ton of them out there. There's a number available. You can start at the bottom end, and I recommend, if you have any soldering skill, going to a company called DIY, and they make something called the DIY RE. You can buy it unassembled or assembled, and I think they're like $60 shipped, something like that. Really inexpensive. The one that I use myself and that I really prefer, I really had a hard time at a certain point when I was, especially when I was doing guitars, high gain guitars, is not getting the level of output I needed to match my guitar signal going into the amp. So it always sounded wrong. I'd play through my amp, I'd get my sound. Then when I did the reamp, it sounded completely different because the signal level was so wrong. So I'm using the one somebody just mentioned. It's called the Reincarnator from AMT. The cool thing about this is that it actually has a direct box and a reamper in it. So you get two different units basically for the price of one. And I use this on my pedal board too, so that at the end of my chain, I have a separate DI that I can send out to a board or a clean, just great to have the option. The other is that this has a level of boost switches. Let me see if I can get a focus on that, where I can go either no boost and then +6 and +12 dB. So I can do a massive push. If I'm getting a really weak signal out of my computer or out of an interface, I can boost it up to the level I need. So a lot of good routing on it. And I can also send a through, meaning I can go into this and split, going one signal to the computer and one signal out to my amp and monitor in real time. That's a very cool unit, and it doesn't cost much more than a lot of the decent units like a Radial or something. I didn't find their basic level one that's like about $100-$120. I had to actually go in and change some electronics in it to get it to function the way I wanted. Wasn't a fan of that one, but I think like the X amp, things like that, those things are $200. This is cheaper than that, and I like it better. So I recommend that. In all transparency, I'm an artist with AMT, but I do buy their stuff, and I paid for this. So I actually bought two of them, one for guitar and one for bass. But you will need one of those if you're going to do reamping. So again, there's kind of an escalating level of what you want to do. Either through your gear into the computer and record that end sound, clean into the computer and use a simulator of an amp, or clean into the computer, send out to your reamp box in your gear and not have to nail down your exact tone or have all that adjustability until the last. So those are your main options with getting your sound. So what we've covered so far is the gear you need to get started, how to get everything set up inside the computer, what the essential software is, and now getting your sound in and out and what kind of options you have there. As far as the basics go, this is pretty much everything you need to get started with digital recording, and then you just learn as need happens. And what I mean by that is I find a lot of guys too get intimidated by all the things that you can do or the complication, and they go, oh man, I don't understand all this, and they back away. Just because something's cool and you're capable of it doesn't mean you need to mess with it. Only really spend time learning one step at a time about the things that are essential to what you do. If you're buying this mostly for practice, then just learn how to do pitch and time stretching, how to change the pitch of a song so that you can play along to it in the same tuning as your instrument. If you're working with EQ, how to get EQ plugins working and things. Don't worry about all the other stuff, because there's an infinite amount of things you can do with digital recording setups. Don't get intimidated by it. There's short tutorials all over YouTube and things, and they can really help out. Now on tutorials, especially about getting your sound and mixing, I've done a couple on the channel. I definitely recommend checking them out. They're both guitar and bass specific. You can check those out, and I've done deeper dives on the Patreon channels at Patreon and Subscribestar. Those links will be down below, and I do a bit more with that. On the Finally Getting Its Legs recordings series I'm going to be doing, there's going to be a lot covering that too. But there's resources everywhere. Don't get overwhelmed. It's not as complex as it seems. So let's check a couple questions here and see where we are. Planning on tracking everything this Sunday. FL Studio and Studio One. Great workflow. How do you recommend for a tried and true drum capture? If you're using live drums, it's hasn't changed since the beginning of time. Just getting microphones, having a good engineer and someone knows how to mic up a drum kit and get that sound in. And then depending, you can either use hardware for your compressors and your reverbs and things like that, or you can do it all in the box. But if you don't already have somebody who knows what they're doing with drums, get them in there, because I would say drums are my Achilles heel. The engineer that I work with for a lot of my stuff, the biggest time suck we spend is getting the drums right, because there's just a lot of complexity with it. Or if you're going to use triggers, if you're beginning, I don't always like to rely on triggers, but if you're someone who hasn't really gotten, really into drum miking, or you're worried about production value, a way you can go with that is either get a hold of or rent an electronic kit, like a Roland TD series or something, play the drums via MIDI into the computer, and then use something like Easy Drummer, Drum Kit from Hell, Steven Slate drums, any of the stuff that I listed, and use that MIDI track to trigger those really polished sounding drums. That may help you out too. When I've wanted a drummer to sit in on a track of mine, but I can't guarantee the quality or sound of where he is and he's not local, I've done that a number of times. It's just had him play on an electronic kit. And then I use my own samples and sounds to create his kit here and get a really good polished sound. So that would be my recommendation on that stuff. The buffer and the AMT, yeah, it is really good. Icky, my man, decision paralysis, a lot of that. Yeah, again, then just go with the recommendations I did. And again, that's the great thing about not spending a lot of money or a lot of crazy stuff on technology up front, is you don't feel as bad about upgrading later if it doesn't work. So, maybe I would either go Behringer or Focusrite for a beginner interface, JBL or M Audio or something for your monitors, and this the reamper was the Reincarnator from AMT, which I think actually they're on Amazon now. It's a Russian-based company, but I used to be able to get their stuff through Reverb, but I think they're on Amazon, which is pretty cool. So check that out. So now we've kind of gotten through the different recording and useful scenarios. We've covered the hardware you need, software and approach. Now let's look at what you really want to consider as far as how much time you spend getting into it, because this is a problem I see too. It seems like kind of an odd thing, but what I would recommend, and again, this is very off, but I've noticed it's a problem. Devote learning about digital recording the same way you do practice time. Don't let yourself go down a wormhole, because it can happen. And just realize there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. You may not even do a couple of recordings right away. You have to learn about stuff. But don't use your base practice time to learn about this stuff. I see guys that get a recording set up and then they haven't practiced in like 2 weeks. And they're like, oh, I'm still trying to get my stuff together and everything. Don't let it replace your practice time. Give yourself like, okay, I'm not ready to use this stuff. I don't understand it yet. Practice for an hour, then go, okay, I'm now going to practice learning about the computer for an hour. So then you do those two things separately, but don't neglect and substitute one for the other. Only allow yourself a specific amount of time on a specific subject and learn as you go. Maybe give yourself an appointment each week where you sit down to watch YouTube videos and go through things, but still get your practice in. Don't suddenly, because you have a new toy, and we tend to do this with amps and everything else, go, oh, I've got this new thing, and now until it's perfect or it's working the way I want, I slack off and I just devote my time to really getting this thing down. Nope. Keep your practice going at the place it is until you're up and running with it. So that'll make a big difference too. And another just side note that kind of pops in my head, another thing this can really help out with is your musical education in a number of different ways. Like the other week, I talked a lot about swing feel and how people can't identify it very well. They don't know how to play against it and things. instead of having to come up with, some way of learning this, if you don't have a formal teacher or something like that, you could get drum loops that are based on a swing feel and just jam over them and get used to being able to play it. Another great way to learn something using the computer. You have a tireless drummer who can play in any feel possible, and you can get used to it. Same thing with odd time. Create a template of, I'm going to do 5/4, and just jam over it endlessly until you get used to not counting, but actually being able to feel what 5/4 time feels like. And that's, to me, the most effective way to practice, not constantly analyzing something, but being able to actually do it. So 2 more ways that you're given a unique opportunity to use digital tools for your performance and recording. So, Danny, good to see you. So with all of that covered, I'm going to open up to a couple of questions, start hitting away, anything that I've covered or anything you'd like me to go into. And what I want to kind of do, though, is keep the subject pretty close in as far as recording, practicing, any of the hardware, any questions like that. Any recording setups that you're wondering about, fire away and let's see what we got. Yeah, a drummer with perfect timing. Yeah, it's they exist and they're right back there. So, but barring any questions, the other thing that I find that gets missed when a lot of people get into digital computing, or recording rather, is learning and understanding, and this goes back to touching on EQ, realizing that it's a fantastic reference for learning your place in music. That when we develop our sound, we develop it in isolation. You're not hearing drums, you're not hearing guitars, and people don't realize how much that affects your sound. That, it's in a mix. It has to go somewhere. Weird. Lighting just went out here. I think because of the heat wave, we may be blowing a switch, but we'll keep going. Yeah, I think we blew a fuse here. Anyway, you can still see. Let's see. But so as far as the EQ goes, being able to put up drum sounds and guitars or play against other songs and see how that stuff goes can really be effective, and that helps a lot too. Let's see. Can the effects and aux channels on a mixer be used for reamping? No. It's kind of, if you're talking about a hardware external mixer, it's not that unit that's kind of the thing. It's that the type of signal coming out of your interface isn't at the level you need it to be. So it would still be at too low a level going into the mixer. It's about the signal level, not just the routing. Let's see. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Part of the problem. How far down the rabbit hole do you go with edits to get everything to lock together? You don't. You learn to play. Okay. I mean, some editing knowledge can be useful, but that's probably the last I would get to. When you're talking about edits and getting things to lock together, you don't need edits if you get it right. So that, to me, would be the point of the heavy practice and being able to analyze your playing, is to be able to sit there and really lock in, listen to yourself back and go, I'm dragging the beat here. I'm doing this. This is being able to use the computer. And actually, that's a good question, and it's going to enable a bit of a rant that I was debating about going on. But here's where it's 2 sides of the sword on digital recording, is when you're doing this stuff, it gives you so much better an opportunity to perfect your playing and understand it and do it right. And people, rather than do that, go in and immediately go, okay, I'm not going to actually advance my playing. I'm going to use the computer to correct things. If you use the computer to constantly correct things, then you're never able to actually do it. It's kind of the using tablature of digital recording. One, that's at an advanced stage. Unless you're releasing something commercially or something, I wouldn't worry about that. And 2, don't be so ready to strip the humanity out of your performance. 3, you have all the time in the world, all the practice tools, get that great take. I would rather sit there if I'm really struggling with a part and take 2 hours to really nail one that I'm really proud of and sounds great, than to do one take and sit there and cut the damn thing up. Even if people don't know it in the end, I know it. And that's what matters most. So let's see. How about headroom? I have an XFX3, and I like the headroom that simulated power amp provide. Is there any way to get that headroom with a pedal like Sans amp? I'm not sure I completely get the question there, Gabriel. But basically, headroom is just the amount of gain going into something before it peaks. So you're really just kind of playing with the levels out, like on a Sans amp or something. Then just drop your level, and that's going to give you that headroom, or pull the blend back a bit. I think that's what you're getting at. But if you need further explanation, hit up with a part B on that. Watching me at 2x speed to catch up, and now I sound drunk. What makes you think I'm not? Nothing worse than fixing a repeat. Yeah. Yes, and please hit like. It's always appreciated and helps the stream and the info get out to other people. That's what we're here to do. Exactly, and that's a good point too. Thank you, Stephen. Talking about punch-ins. If I had a really great performance, but one part was a little screwy, I'd be more likely to go back and do what Stephen did, which is just punch in a live take of a specific part and go like, I like everything else and I want to keep it, but maybe that one section I'd just like to replay it. I would be more inclined to do that than I would to go in and start really chop editing the hell out of something. So, good call. Is it worth double tracking bass parts? No. It could be used for effect at some points, things like that, but I don't find that most of the time we're playing anything that's going to make that worth it. And with bass, you're really asking for some bad stuff to go. Because of the frequencies we're usually playing in, slight tuning issues can start to really show up badly. And also, if your time isn't absolutely flawless, 2 low notes played slightly off, that's not good times. I can't think of a time where I've ever double tracked myself on bass, ever. It's just not good. I wouldn't recommend it at all. Guitar, it's almost essential in hard rock and metal to get the stereo field, but that's the other thing, is we're driven through the front and in mono. So unless you're creating a stereo track, you're just overlaying sounds, and it just doesn't make sense. I wouldn't do it. So a lot of this stuff is getting into kind of myths and other things that you see floating around. So I love those type of questions. I definitely want to dispel as much as I can here too. So we're getting into kind of the end game here. My pleasure, Mr. Bennett. If you have any last questions or things here, I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations before I roll out on how to save money and things. And remember, we can keep this going in the comments below. I always respond to everything. Let me know down below, and your recommendations. I'd love to see too what stuff you're using that you're happy with, other things that you could warn people against, really crap software, give you a bunch of problems. The community is what it's about. So my favorite bass effect, without question, is a phaser. I love me a phaser. I have 3 of them, and they are just the best things ever. The thing that got me into bass phasers was E5150 from Black Sabbath is all phaser and heavy bass and guitar, and it's just amazing. And the intro to You're No Good from Van Halen, I heard those, did me in for life. I'm a complete phaser addict. Okay, 3 tracks of bass, Mike. Okay, good thing, Danny, but that's a clarification I want to make, and that's very cool that you brought that up. What some people conflate 2 different things that aren't the same. One is multiple tracks of bass, and the other is multi-tracking bass. Those are 2 different things. Now, if you're taking one signal, like say I'm playing my bass and I'm having it come out of 3 sources that I'm summing together for a certain sound, that's really still only one bass performance. So say I'm recording myself direct and through an amp and another through some sort of effect. That's still just one performance. I'm just treating it sonically 3 different ways. People hear that sometimes and think that you're talking about actually multi-tracking, meaning I'm playing the bass performance over and over. That's not the same thing. Laying multiple performances on top of each other is what you want to avoid. That's where things get really train wrecky. Having one sound that you're manipulating in multiple ways and stacking together, used all the time, perfectly legitimate. If you're into that, definitely go ahead and experiment. Let's see. Higher quality bit rates for recording actually better. They can be, but you're probably not going to hear it. Remember that for even just 5-10 years ago, the quality of preamps, converters, and bit rates that you're hearing on most albums aren't what things are capable of now, but they're probably going to be better than the sounds you're getting. That is end of the road considerations. And anybody who tells me that they can hear the difference between a 24-bit and a 96K mix, you got to be really, really good to bring out those differences. So I would record at just a satisfactory bit rate and not bog your computer down unnecessarily. Be fine. My favorite metal bass tone recorded. I have a number of them. I think that kind of goes away when you have your own sound, which I feel like I kind of do. But some of my favorite recordings have been Eddie Jackson's tone on the Empire and Operation Mindcrime album, Doug Pinnick's sound on King's X's Dogman, Dee Dee Verney's bass tone on, let me think. That's a tie on that one, but I always had an affection for Under the Influence. There's a number of them. There's some great tones out there. I'm sure I could come up with more, but those would be a few off the top of my head. DISH1. Very cool. Let me check out Gabriel's comment here. He's talking about using the SVT sim in an Axe Effects. Helps his playing, and when I play a Sans amp, I feel that the bass is thinner. Maybe it's the cab sim. Yeah, that could definitely be it. Or they just don't dial in the same. So you may have to, play a bit more by ear and a little less by eye, trying to dial things in. Now, see, I'm going to assign you a cool experiment. What you want to do is record your Axe Effects with your ideal sound, then play through the Sans amp, EQ match them. Look up EQ matching with a plugin, and then find out the difference and see why it sounds different. See, then you'll learn a lot about mixing, about dialing in tone, and another great way of being able to use a DAW. So try that out. So to start wrapping up, again, thank you as always. It's very cool doing this stuff. Absolutely, Gabriel. Hope it helps out. And, report back. Be in the comments and let us know how it goes. There's 2 tutorials on the YouTube channel about how to do EQ matching, as well as the Patreon pages. Go grab them and they'll take care of you. But so my recommendations on this, to put it all in a row so you have it, I would go with Focusrite or Behringer or M Audio up front. The Behringer worked fine for me. Focusrite gets good reviews. For initial software, Reaper. If you level up from that, I find the best deal, and my favorite is the PreSonus Studio One stuff. Monitors, JBL, M Audio, Kali. I find they all have competing things for a couple good things. If you're going to get headphones, get something from maybe Sony or Beyerdynamic that are designed for recording and are fairly flat. Drum software, anything cheap that uses MIDI grooves. Like I said, an off-brand might be the Ugertone, Riot Drums or something like that, or Blasting Room does great stuff. Like I said, there's so many different drum softwares out there. but there's also Get Good Drums, Slate, Tune Track has Drum Kit from Hell and Easy Drummer. Whatever seems in your affordability and what the demos appeal to your ears. And then if you're looking for a reamper unit, I would either go with the higher end radial stuff or that AMT reincarnator. Those are giving me the best results. If you really just want to get started, you can also do the DIY RE unit, and you can buy them assembled or save a few bucks and assemble them yourself. So encapsulated, that's kind of my recommendations for all this type of stuff as far as a shopping list. And then just an adequate computer, laptop, or a tablet. It's really not that complex, and I think it can really level up your playing, your musical education, and your development as an artist. So again, I think we're going to probably wrap at that point, but give me a shout in the comments. If you think this helps somebody out, share, please do. If you haven't subscribed or you're just checking in, I've noticed that basically about 4% of the people who watch actually subscribe. So it's not about ego. I don't care about all this type of stuff, but the more subscribers the channel has and the likes, the more they push it in the rankings so we can get this stuff out to people. And let's talk about it in the comments. Let's get to some things about, preferences in software, examples of drum tracks that you've made, things like that. Get in there to share it and let's talk about it. And I hope this helps. And I'm looking forward to getting some references. And you guys always surprise me with stuff. I definitely get as much info in the comment section as I give out on here sometimes. So always appreciative. Oh, you're quite welcome, Danny, Mr. Bennett. Always appreciated that you guys join in. I hope this helps you out. And I have that tablature rant coming up here soon. So be sure to tune in for that one. I'm really going to go down the crushing it and all the myths about it kind of thing. So I'll see you here in a few days. And there are 3 gear demos coming up in the next week and a half. So hope to see you on that. McG out. I'll see you on the next one.